Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. So we have two wide releases last weekend, Knives Out and Queen and Slim. Let's see how those two movies did over the Thanksgiving holidays. Alright, let's jump right in. Coming in at number 1 is Frozen 2. In its second weekend, it pulled in 85.3 million. That we're going by the 3-day figures here. Drop off is about 35% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is 287 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 451 million for a worldwide total of 738 million. The first Frozen movie grossed 1.2 billion, and since Frozen 2 started off way better, it looks like it'll beat the 1.2 billion figure. Alright, let's move on to number 2, which is one of the new releases last weekend, and that is the comedic thriller, I believe. Knives Out. It's well reviewed at 96% on the tomato meter, has an A- cinema score. It's Rian Johnson directs. He directed Last Jedi as well as Looper. It's a star-studded cast: Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, on and on and on. And it's like a whodunit, a thriller, right? Craig stars as a detective, investigating the death of the patriarch of a quirky family. And this is a movie that I say could probably open somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range for the 3-day weekend. But it did way better. It opened to 27 million. And domestic gross so far is about 42 million. Let's see if it opened overseas already. Yes, the numbers are in for overseas, the overseas market. It pulled in an additional 28.3 million for a worldwide total of about 70 million. So it's actually doing pretty well. I mean, the budget for this movie is about 40 million. Alright, let's move on to number 3, and that is Ford versus Ferrari. Continues to do well. I pulled in at 13.2 million in its third weekend. Drop off is relatively low as well, 16%. And domestic gross is about 81 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional 62.3 million for a worldwide total of 143 million. I guess looks like the overseas market is not revving up, but I don't know how wide it opened overseas yet. The budget for this movie is 100 million. So it still has some ways to go to break even. It's getting there. Alright, let's move on to number 4, which is the Mr. Rogers biopic, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. In its second weekend, it dropped about 11% from the previous weekend to put in 11.8 million. Domestic gross is about 34 million, and let's see, hasn't opened overseas yet, so 34 million it is. But again, this might not be a movie that plays well overseas, since this is, Mr. Rogers might not be that huge overseas, or it might not, people might not know about it at all, so they have to expend additional advertising dollars for this movie. Overall, it's off to a good start. The budget for this movie is 25 million, which is pretty decent for a movie of this type, right? And it opened well, 13.5 million. I say this movie could probably open the same about the 10 million range, but it opened to 13.5 million, so it's just right there. I mean, Tom Hanks starred in a similar movie back in 2013 called Saving Mr. Banks, and it opened similar. It went on to gross 83 million domestically and 118 million worldwide. So there's still room for Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood yet. Alright, number 5 is one of the new releases last weekend, and that is Queen and Slim, about a couple, African-American couple who went on a date and somehow ended up killing or accidentally killing a police officer during a traffic stop. This movie is surprisingly well reviewed, 81% on the tomato meter and an A- cinema score. It pulled in 11.7 in its opening weekend. Domestic gross is about 15.8 million so far, and it hasn't had a overseas release yet, or the numbers haven't come in yet. So this is a movie that I say could probably pull in 5 million 3 days and 8 million 5 days, so definitely off there. Yeah, so surprisingly, this movie is actually doing okay. Like I said, the thing holding this movie back, I thought, was probably the lack of star power. Daniel Kaluuya was in was it Get Out? Yeah, I believe it was Get Out. And then Jodie Turner-Smith making her, debut here. Chloe Sevigny is in here. But other than that, not a Knives Out, for example, right? It's not a star-studded cast. But, the budget is okay. And, according to the interwebs, it ranges from 17 to 20 million. Let's call it 20 million. So it's doing decent for 20. The opening is decent for a $20 million budget. Let's see how well it holds up in its second weekend. All right, number 6 is the Chadwick Boseman star 21 Bridges. Is a thriller about an NYPD detective on the hunt for a couple of criminals who killed 8 cops during the robbery. In the second weekend, it dropped about 37% to pull in 5.8 million. Let's see, domestic gross is about 19.5 million, and let's see, overseas it put in an additional 2.7 million for a worldwide total of 22 million. The budget for this movie is only 33 million, so even though it doesn't have a huge box office, here and overseas, it's still doing decent at the box office right now. All right, number 7 is the comedy Playing with Fire. In its fourth weekend, it pulled in 4.2 million, drop off about 7% from the previous weekend, and domestic gross so far is about 39 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it put in an additional 6 million for a worldwide total of 45 million. All right, number 8 is the Roland Emmerich directed World War II movie, Midway. In its fourth weekend, it pulled in about 4 million for domestic gross about 50 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in about 49 million for a worldwide total of nearly 100 million. So it probably crossed the 100 million mark as of this time. And like I said, no one really asked for a World War II movie at this time, but Roland Emmerich made one to take advantage of the Veterans Day, and it's actually doing a little bit decent. Okay, budget for this movie 60 million, not huge by this action movie standards, but it's only pulling in about 50 million here so far. And overseas, it looks like it's doing about equal to what is pulling in here. So we'll see how much more it can squeeze from the overseas market. All right, number 9 is the superhero movie, Joker. This movie in its 9th weekend, it's pulled in about 2 million, drop off about 26% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is 330 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 717 million for a worldwide total of about 1 billion. Pretty impressive for a movie that cost 55 million to make. All right, let's close out the top 10 with Last Christmas. It pulled in about 1.9 or 2 million in its fourth weekend, drop off of about 36% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 31 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional 36 million for a worldwide total of about 68 million. All right, that's it for the top 10. Let's move on to the Y releases this weekend, and we're going to have one, and that is Playmobil the movie. No one knew that they needed a Playmobil movie, but they made one anyway. This Playmobil is kind of like the sibling of the those Lego blocks. This is based on the toy blocks, except that it's made by a different company. Instead of Lego, it's Playmobil, and they created a spy action adventure comedy movie out of it. Just like the Lego movie, right? Review so far is pretty terrible, 24% at the tomato meter, and I'm not sure how well this movie will play with its target audience. I mean, basically young ones. I mean, the brand itself are mostly targeted toward the young kids. I mean, kids mostly grew up with Legos, and Playmobil is just like the brand that's there. So again, I don't know how well this movie will play. So as you can see, they're trying to take the Lego movie playbook, right? Lego the movie. This one is Playmobil the movie. It has no connection to the blocks other than that. I mean, this character could probably break apart and be put together, but you don't see that in the trailers. Again, I don't think this one will be as successful as the Lego movies, but I could be wrong like I did for last week's movies. So I think this movie is probably going to have a weekend opening of somewhere, I think, in the 8 to 10 million range. All right, so that's a quick one for this weekend. Tune in next time to see how it did. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.